We're good? Okay. So, we're ready to start. Good morning, everyone. My name is Murilo. I'm going to be talking, well, for you on YouTube, I guess, that may not know me. Everyone here, I guess, knows me. So, we also have a live aspect of it. I'm going to be talking about effective data science teams with Databooks. So, well, we'll get into what Databooks actually is. But before, just talking about what we're going to talk about more today. So first is like data science in the wild, right? So what I see here and there, what Jupyter notebooks are, and also what their role are in data science. Some issues with notebooks. So actually, I see Gelders. We have a colleague here, Nicolas Gelders. You're gonna like this presentation a lot. We're also gonna talk about some solutions that notebooks has. Like we have some issues. It's not a new thing, right? So some solutions that exist, and then we're gonna talk about data books. Yay! So maybe also a disclaimer before we start. This is a tool that I created because I didn't see my needs being met out there. So yeah, so this is why I'm super pumped up, super hyped. So we're gonna do a demo. So it's always a bit, nervous to demo live on YouTube and everything. But we're also gonna talk about what it does and also how it works. So let's get to it. So before I actually go into my presentation, I think it's relevant to introduce myself, right? Talk a bit about me. So my name, as I said, is Murilo. I'm from Brazil. I have a bachelor's in mechanical engineering. I have a master's in artificial intelligence. I have some cloud certifications. So I have from Google, AWS, and HashiCorp. So from Google, the data is in parentheses because it actually expired, but I used to have a data engineering certification and a machine learning one. For AWS, I'm machine learning certified, and I have a certification for Terraform. I am proudly co-captain and coach of the Databooks futsal team. Go Databooks. So that's our internal team here. I'm also a coach at the AI business unit. And when I'm not scoring goals or coaching or, saving babies from burning buildings or anything or helping the elderly cross the street, I'm actually a machine learning here at Data Roots. So before I go further, maybe let's just talk about a bit more of what machine learning engineering is, how I see machine learning engineer. And the way I see it is that I help businesses, our clients, right, to put machine learning models into production. So to get value from it, right? And then doing so in different clients, we kind of see some reoccurring topics, right? So sometimes there's just some skepticism from the business, right? They're not sure if AI is the way to go or if it really works or can we actually use it. Sometimes there's just a issue of auditability, right? So sometimes we don't keep track of all this stuff, all the steps, so we cannot reproduce the results. Sometimes, again, it damages the trust between AI and businesses. Sometimes you see some issues between data engineers and data scientists, right? So in this process of going from development to production, there's usually like a handover kind of thing to the data engineers, but the requirements are very different, and sometimes we see some friction between the two teams. Or sometimes we actually see friction in between the data science team itself. So this is the one that we're actually gonna focus a bit more here, right? So why does this happen? And a big part of why this friction happens is because of data science tooling. And by data science tooling, yes, you guessed it, I'm talking about notebooks, because data scientists love notebooks, right? But again, maybe let's just talk a bit more about Jupyter notebooks if you're not familiar with what they are. Jupyter notebooks, so when I say notebooks, I mean Jupyter notebooks. There are different flavors out there, but I'm going to talk about Jupyter notebooks in this presentation. If you don't know what they are basically an interactive programming environment. So you can run little bits of code and you can see the output of each bit. It also saves memory, so I save variables in memory, right? So it's stateful. The format is actually this IPyNB extension, but if you actually were to open one of them up, you're just going to see some JSON here. So this is going to be important later. So just bear this in mind. When I say Jupyter notebooks, you can think of Python, but that's not true. It doesn't have to be just Python. You can have Jupyter notebooks in R, in Spark, in PySpark, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so this is how they would look like. So you have different types of these groups, right, which are called cells in notebooks. So you have different types of cells as well. This is a markdown. So if you just want to write some nice stuff, you want to put some links, some images, you can do that here. You have some code cells right here. So this is where you actually run and you can store variables in memory. Here's another code cell, markdown cell. And then here you have another code cell that you actually see some outputs. And actually this visualization, this very interactive, very dynamic environment is really nice for data scientists, right? Like if you want to do exploration, you have a lot of images, you want to share this report with other people, and you want to see what you found, right? So this is very, very, very cool for data science. That's why it's very popular. Here are some places where you can find Jupyter notebooks out there, right? So Kaggle, if you don't know what it is a platform that hosts data sets and data science competitions. So it's very popular for people that are learning. They actually have their own notebooks there as well, their own notebook platform. Some people like notebooks so much that they write books with it. Actually, I think there are even O'Reilly books that started with Jupyter notebooks, right? So people actually published it, and O'Reilly had the animal books, right? So really cool. More in the learning path, Fast AI. They also have some courses, and you also see a lot of the times in YouTube and stuff. People, when they're doing tutorial, doing a demo, they actually use Jupyter notebooks for that. All the cloud providers, so the three big ones, right? Google, they have their notebook solutions with Vertex AI. Amazon SageMaker from AWS, right? They also have a lot of notebooks there, and Azure ML, they also offer their notebooks. So it's all prevalent there, and everywhere you're going to see data science, you're going to see notebooks probably, right? Google Colab, it's from Google Drive. You can actually start a notebook yourself, so you don't have to install anything. You can also have a virtual machine, even with a GPU or a TPU. So it's really nice, and it's a very low entry barrier for people to learn as well. So it became very popular throughout the times. And this is a bit controversial one, so Gelders, don't jump on me, okay? We're gonna have questions at the end. We can contest everything. But some people like notebooks so much that they created Papermill, and Papermill is a way to put notebooks in production. So I'm not gonna go the merit of that, but it exists, right? So it's very, very, very cool. But as you could probably guess by now, it's not all a sea of roses, right? Some people don't like notebooks. So here on the left, we have a screenshot from a Twitter from Joel Gruss. I don't know if I'm butchering his name. It's actually a very nice talk. So he actually went to JupyterCon, so where we have Jupyter notebooks, and he did a talk on I don't like notebooks. So he goes into why he doesn't like notebooks, et cetera, et cetera. And here on my right, I have Nicholas Gelders. So for you that cannot see the audience, Gelders is actually the colleague that sits here, and he does not like notebooks, to say the least. But okay, cool. I also have my beef with notebooks as well, right? Like I also had some issues, but my issues mainly come with Git, because traditional software development tools like Git, they don't really work that well with Jupyter notebooks. We're gonna see a bit more about that later. And if you don't know what Git is, it's basically a way to version your software, right? You can version your code, and then you can go back in time and compare, and you can also allow teams to work successfully, because then you can kind of decouple things, right? You can work on your own, they work on your own. It's okay. I'm not gonna go too much more on Git, but yeah, I'm expecting everyone here is familiar with them. So let's carry on with this. Cool. This is not a new problem, as you could have guessed, right? I didn't create notebooks. I'm not the first one to use them. So this is something that has been out there, and there are some solutions for this, right? The easiest one that I actually have some friends and colleagues that they just say, I don't like notebooks, so let's just not use them, right? And they come in different flavors. So either you can just not use them at all, or maybe you don't commit your notebooks in Git. Or even maybe you can say you can commit them, but then they're like a private artifact, right? So you have a Murilo notebook that if you want to use Debo, you have to copy my notebook and kind of put your own, right? So I don't touch yours, you don't touch mine. Okay. That's a solution. I'm not a big fan of that, but okay, I think there are better ways we can do with this. Another solution that exists that's very popular is Jupyter that kind of goes on that line. So Jupyter is a way to sync notebooks and Python scripts, and then it has a two-way sync. So right, if you change something on the script, it will change on the notebook, etc., vice versa, right? And the way that this would work is that you only commit your Python scripts on Git, right? So you still have the notebooks in a way because it's linked, but you only commit the scripts. You have other things here. So some other people realize that the metadata in notebooks, they are problematic when you talk about Git. And there's this package called nbclean. They're supposed to extract some metadata, clean it before you actually commit it to Git. There's some other packages, so like nbdev. nbdev is more of a opinionated way. It has like a template to create Python packages with notebooks. So it does a lot of stuff. It creates documentation. It creates the actual Python scripts, et cetera, et cetera. And they also have a way to fix some conflicts. They have a way to extract some metadata from notebooks and so forth. And nbdime stands for notebook diffing and merging. And it's a way, so whenever you're going to do a Git merge, you can use this tool to have a nice way to do it, right? Because again, there can be a lot of issues. And also, if you want to compare two versions of your notebook, you have a nice version between them. Okay. And I tried these things. Well, most of them, some of them I didn't know until after I created Databooks. But some of them I did try, and I wasn't super satisfied. So yeah, I created my own here. So yay. Yeah. Stop. It's okay. Just a minute. So yeah, as you can probably guess, we're going to talk a bit more about Databooks, right? So what are Databooks? Databooks is a CLI tool. So CLI stands for command line interface. We're going to see a demo, but basically the stuff you run in your terminal, something like Black or pip, right? It's about caring about notebooks. So, if you like notebooks, if you care about them, if you want to share them, that's your tool for you. I also made this decision to make a CLI tool. It was also because it's more flexible, right? So if you have a CLI tool, you can run your terminal, but you can also run on CI/CD, you can also run as a pre-commit hook, right? So we're gonna go. I mean, there's a little bit more information there. It has 3 features for now. I'm also working on adding some other things. Right now, you can actually remove notebook metadata. You can fix conflicted notebooks, and you can also assert metadata values on your notebooks, right? So again, I'm gonna go a bit more in detail. We're gonna have a demo, so we're gonna see. It's also configurable, so you can actually pass in options. You can have a configuration file. And the way that I try to build this is to also serve as an API for handling notebooks, right? When I looked what is out there, I wasn't really satisfied. So I tried to also create a way that if you want to take a notebook and manipulate it, you can also do it. It has some pre-commit hooks available. So if you don't know what pre-commit hook is, basically a function that it runs before your notebook is actually committed, right? So, and the way that these pre-commit hooks are available is with the pre-commit package, right? So pre-commit package is a Python package that makes it easier to implement these pre-commit hooks, right? So if you go there on precommit.com and you look for Databooks, you're gonna see the 2 comments that we have available here. Cool. So I think talk is cheap. Let's see some action. Let's hope this works. So drum roll. So here you're gonna see we have a demo notebook, which is actually what's running here, right? And you're gonna see we have different types of cells. We're gonna see we have a cell tag here, and yeah, etc., right? So if you want to install it, first you'd want to do pip install Databooks. So this is already installed, so it shouldn't be. It's here. And then you have just like any other CLI tool, right? So if you do Databooks help, you're gonna see what's available. By the way, is this too small? Is this okay size? Is this better? More? Too much? One more? Okay, let's try this one more time. Is it okay? Yeah? Yeah? Is this okay too? Maybe I can actually do the... there's a presentation mode here. Yeah, presentation mode. Okay, a bit underwhelming, but okay. Anyways, so as you can see, we have, well, there's actually this diff one here, which I put it there in the beginning, but I haven't gotten to it yet. So it's actually not, and then it would say implemented if Gelders hadn't asked me to expand so much, but it would actually say that there. So blame Gelders there. But let's kind of go one by one, right? So let's start with Databooks Meta. And again, they all have their own help, right? So you can see the only thing you actually need to pass is a path. So it kind of, I took a lot of inspiration from Black, right? So you pass a path, and then it's going to find the notebooks that are in that path. So you can also just check. But if you actually want to overwrite the files that you have, you actually have to pass this -w here, right? So if I do Databooks meta -w, and then this should, yeah. So it has here, one file will be overwritten and remove metadata from one notebook. So if I'm to refresh this, you're going to see that the execution count goes away, right? So for example, if you just do something and then like the execution count is not there, I'm just going to take it away. So let's refresh this to see if this actually worked. And drum roll. It worked. Oh yeah, it's gone. Come on, again. Okay. Some other things that it does. Yeah, please, no, I'll give you some time. Thanks, Gelders. Some other things too that it does, right? So you see here that the cell tags are also gone, right? So, and actually you cannot see this here, but even the notebook. So each cell has metadata, but the notebook itself has metadata, right? So it actually stores. Maybe I can actually show this is easier. So this is how a notebook looks like if you were to actually open one. So it's just JSON, right? This is actually the clean version. So actually, maybe give me 1 second. I'll just do store. Yeah. So I'll just show how it is before, right? So you see, like these are the cells. So it's a list. It has an ID. So it can get very messy. But what I also want to show at the bottom is the notebook metadata. So it has inputs, outputs, et cetera, one for each cell. And this is the notebook metadata here, right? So you see it has a display name here, Python 3 PyKernel. It has the name, it has even the notebook version, right? So that means that if I give you, Jonas, the CEO, the boss, notebook, and you just open it on Jupyter, but you have a different kernel and has a different name, when you try to commit it, there will already be a conflict, even though you didn't change anything, just because of this metadata that is here, right? So this can be very problematic. And if I run again, Databooks meta. So remove this, and then if I see this here, So now it's also reordered, right, the field. So the metadata is actually up top, but you actually see that I removed all the notebook metadata. So it's already a step forward into trying to reduce the amount of conflicts that you're going to have, right? So let's say it's also configurable, like I said. So if you want to say remove the output as well, you can actually do -- remove outs, right? So now by passing this argument here, what should happen is that the outputs are also out, right? So you can choose, see, like magic. So Gather is super impressed right now. I think I'm convincing him to use notebooks from now on. But anyways, so again, it's kind of up to you, right? Maybe outputs are very valuable because I do think there's a value in outputs. Like maybe you forget to set a random seed, right? Maybe you forget to do this, so it's random, but you expect this to execute always the same time. And having the outputs there, sometimes it is valuable, right? So that's why it's kind of up to the user. Maybe another thing just to mention here, I have this PyProject.toml. I'm not going to go into detail here, but that's also the configuration. So if you don't want to keep passing all the time this -- remove out, you can just pass it here on the PyProject.toml. So we'll do it by default, right? So same thing with Black and other CLI tools. Cool. However, so I'm going to restore. Sometimes there are actual conflicts on the notebooks, right? So let's see if I have status. If I do git merge and I merge this this branch here called conflict branch, I wonder what will happen, right? But if I try to merge, oh no, there is a conflict here. So if I do here and I do git status, right, you're gonna see that there's both files were modified. If I do that and then demo.ipynb, you're gonna see here that some of the things, so for example, this conflict here is just the ID. So it's not really a valid conflict, right? But there are some other things, and I think the clearest example is on the outputs here. Let's see here, right? So this is actually a change, right? Like you probably changed the text inside. So there's an actual change here. Okay. If I try to refresh this, so if I try to just naively open the notebook, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to say, oh, I could not open it, right? Because this is not a valid JSON contract anymore, right? So this is where Databooks Fix comes in place. So if I do Databooks Fix, help. Again, the only thing you need to pass is a path. Everything else is kind of configurable. So you can also, so by default, we take the metadata from the notebook metadata from one notebook, but you can take the other, you can do this, you can do that. You can also remove some things right before. But if I do Databooks Fix and then just pass the path here, you're going to see that, oh, resolve the conflicts of one notebook, right? So now if I go back here and I try to open this, wow, beautiful. Right? So you kind of try to mimic what you see in Git conflicts here with adding some cell tags, right? So here you have the hash of the commit and you have the commit message and you have some other things here as well. And then you can say like, oh, Murilo, but look, there is a bug here, huh? Like I'm going to open an issue because this and this, it's all the same, just the random. And then I would say look closer because it's not true. Here, you actually have a yay tag and here you don't. So actually when I'm comparing everything that you have there, right? And this is especially useful if you have something like Papermill that actually uses cell tags. You can, of course, choose to remove the cell tags before you do the diffing, but it also catches everything, okay? Cool. The other caveat here is that what I'm doing, I'm not actually fixing the conflicted JSON. I'm actually taking the two previous versions and comparing them, right? So maybe fix is a misnomer, but et cetera. Okay, so the git merge abort. Let's see, git status, okay. And if I refresh, I should have the original state. Okay. So the last thing is that we talked about fixing conflicts and we talked about removing metadata, but sometimes you actually want the metadata there. Like I said, I think I never use Papermill actually, but I'm pretty sure that Papermill uses the Git cell tags. No, sorry, Git cell tags, the notebook cell tags to actually define some stuff, right? So sometimes you can say, I want the cell tags to be there. Or so with that in mind, we came up with the Databooks assert, right? So this is supposed to be a reference to the Python assert, right? So the way that this works is that you pass an expression and it will actually evaluate on the notebook. So a simple example here, right now we have 8 cells, right? So 6 executed plus 2, the markdown is the one that is not executed. So I can do something like Databooks assert, pass the expression, length of notebook cells is equals to 8, right? And then, oh, I have to pass a path as well. And if I run this, you're going to see, look, this demo failed 0 out of 1 checks, right? So if I change this to something like, I don't know, 9 cells or 9, I guess, doesn't matter. It would say, look, it failed. And you see also here that the exit status is also 1, right? So maybe you don't want to type this all the time. and I know that, right? I'm also lazy sometimes. Well, sometimes. But the other thing you can do here is actually pass a recipe, right? So a recipe is basically a shorthand notation, so you don't have to type these things all the time. So I came up with a couple of them that I think is useful. So for starting by hashtags, right? So just to go back to the previous thing I mentioned, but there are other things as well, and you can also create your own recipe. And if you're curious about what the recipes are, you can actually go on our documentation. If I go here, usage overview, you're going to see here we have all the recipes. So what they are and what the expression will look like for this, right? So basically, when you do Databooks cert pass this, and then recipe and has tags, is actually running this whole thing. Okay, so it's just shorthand notation for this. Again, maybe you don't want to run this like first. When I first introduced this to Bart, or other boss, his first thought was like, okay, when would you run this? And I was like, maybe you wouldn't run this, but maybe you can add this in CI/CD. You know, again, we have a pre-commit hook for this, right? So we'll catch these errors first. And this is a very flexible tool, but it also allows for a lot of cool things, right? So for example, if I do Databooks help, once again, we have a recipe called sec_exec, right? So one issue is when the notebook cells are executed out of order, right? So the state is messed up. So if I do Databooks assert -r, that's the path, and oh, sorry, no, this, and then is a sec_exec. It's all good, but as soon as I actually change the order of execution here, right? So this wouldn't be an issue, but maybe let's take something that would be more relevant. Maybe I put this one before this, right? So this vals is not going to be executed. So if you try to restart your notebook, restart and run all cells, this wouldn't be a valid one, right? Because you're referencing a variable that is not yet defined, right? So if you have something like Databooks sec_exec, you're going to see here that it says, oh, look, this failed. So you wouldn't be able to commit this. So in a way, you'll be forced to basically restart kernel and run all cells.
Why make it not getting? I mean, I understand that you want order there, but like, what is the output?
Found issues on notebook metadata. Sorry.
Yeah, like how does this help?
So the Gautier's question is like, you see this output, but how does this help, right? So the way you see this output here, but this you also see that this is a red arrow. Because it's a red arrow, this is as an access status of 1. So it's like when you do flake8 and it doesn't comply to some of the checks, and we would exit 1. So it just says like,
what does it actually check? That's maybe what that the cells are.
Yeah, it's checking.
That they should be executed, or?
Yeah, so it's checking that the execution. Yeah, it's checking that this execution is in order.
Oh, okay.
So it's 1, 2, and then it should go 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So again, this failed because you have 5 and then 3. So in this case, like I was executing this, and then maybe I inserted a cell above, et cetera, and then, well, it's not a valid notebook anymore. But we're trying to catch these errors.
It's kind of this sanity check.
Exactly, right? But like this, yeah, go.
What would happen if you do a 1, 2, 4, 5, 6?
1, 2, 4, 5, 6. Yeah,
like,
so
like that is still in order, but it's
yes.
Missing steps.
Great question, Gautier. Good question. Yeah. But like yes, I'm not gonna try everything. I invite you to try yourself and open an issue if you see an issue, or just contribute.
I'll do that.
Yes, okay. But I'll just say so I created 2 recipes. One is sec_exec, so it's the sequential execution. So it goes from 1 to n, so it has to go 1 by 1. Or there's the sequential increase. So that's kind of what you're saying. So if you skip it, it's more flexible, right? But it's still a bit dangerous because like if I delete a cell that defines a variable, it's still not a valid notebook, right? So it's just to kind of give some flexibility of how strict you want to be with this. I mean, to be really honest, like notebooks allow for me to just like do this, right? And then save it, and that's fine. So that's still not a valid notebook either. It's not a reproducible notebook, but we're still trying to catch more things as early as possible. Cool. Everyone has any other questions from the live audience? Because I think we're going to go to the YouTube questions later, if we have any vision. Yeah, Freddie.
Can you define your own recipes?
Yes, yeah, that's what I was trying to do here. So, so the question was, can we define our own recipe? So you can create your own recipe. Like, so the way that you actually do this is by this. So you pass an expression, because the recipe is really just a shorthand of writing the expression, right? So you do something like this, and this works. If you want to actually create a recipe, then I'll invite you again to the GitHub repo and actually create a recipe, open a pull request, or just create an issue that the recipe is not there. But the idea is that the test, we should have 100% of testing on the recipes. And yeah, it's just a shorthand notation there. Right. So if you have something crazy, some crazy ideas you want to do, you can just do it there. Yes.
And now we're applying one recipe or a couple of recipes like on all files.
Yes.
I guess you can also, instead of a dot, just specify files.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, like in Bash, when you specify something, it already expands to like a path, right? So I can do like Freddie said. So maybe I'll repeat the question again. The question was like, we're specifying a path. We don't need to specify. We could just specify the file, and that is true. So if I do demo.py, it's the same, right? Yeah.
Maybe another question. So now, let's say, yeah, you have your different cells, and I get it. If you remove like a cell or switch the order, if you define variables and so on, it could break your code. Now, you also have, of course, you use notebooks for also commenting your project and so on. And indeed, you have an example there. You're printing a value as part of your report. Now, if you would remove that, in the end, it wouldn't really impact, let's say, the validity of your code or of your project. It's just like a change. Are you also looking into, let's say, doing the check content-wise, like really looking into, okay, is this an issue if you're removing it or not? Because in the end, it's quite an isolated cell that doesn't impact the rest of your code. Are you looking at that difference?
No. So I don't actually go inside what the cell actually like the contents of. Oh, yeah. Sorry. So I guess the question was, it was a long question, so I'll try to summarize. So I guess the question is if we also do some checks on the actual code that is in there. So maybe this was modified, but this doesn't influence anything else, right? So maybe one thing I'll say before, because there was also a comment on like we can add markdown cells like we have here, right? This doesn't influence the execution, so we don't have to check for that, which is also true. One comment there is that the sec exec recipe only looks for executed code cells, right? So for example, otherwise, that's an issue I had, is that this cell was throwing an error, right? Because this is not executed. So this is the first thing. So if you have a markdown cell, that recipe per se is not going to influence. And the follow-up question was kind of if we actually look into what's the code in here, right? If this code actually affects anything else. And the answer is no. We don't actually do anything. We just look at the notebook and the notebook metadata. We don't actually do any analysis on the actual Python code, interpret the code, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Does anyone have a last question? No. Okay. Go there. Yeah.
Sure. But it's more about like the project itself. Like, do you see a bit of an uptake? Like, how do you prioritize issues?
So yeah, we don't have a lot of issues. I have ideas that I like, that I want to do. So I think this is all. I when I thought of this project, I liked it. I wanted to do something with it, but I also kind of wanted to learn and explore and have fun. So it's kind of a mix of what do I think it would be cool, what I think would be cool to develop, and what I think would be interesting, right? So yeah. So again, any issues, suggestions, questions, anything? Okay. Maybe just I have more slides and then I'll go to the questions. Okay. So one thing as well, like one restriction is that you have to pass this in a Python expression, right? Maybe it doesn't fit in an expression. You have to do more things with it, and that's why I try to make the API nice, so you can actually be a way for you to manipulate these notebooks, right? But because this is exactly like this NB is a Databooks object, right? So it's the same. That's how you would write if you had a Python script. So I'll just talk a bit about how it works, right? There are 5 dependencies: Pydantic, GitPython, Rich, Typer, and Tomly. Pydantic is the main one. That's how I'm actually modeling the notebook. So if you don't know what Pydantic is, it's a way to validate and parse JSON. GitPython is to interact with Git. We have Rich, that is the nice images and colors and everything that we have in the terminal. Typer is what I'm using for the actual CLI application for the responsiveness, and Tomly is for the configuration, right? So again, if there's something, you can also import Databooks and actually manipulate Databooks objects, and it's a Pydantic. So if you know Pydantic, great. If you don't, it's a cool library. It's easy to learn. Okay. And just quickly some things on the roadmap. Again, these are things that I think was cool, or some things that I wanted at some point that I didn't see. I want to add more CLI, so support. So I actually want to be able to see notebook differences in the terminal. I want to, like I said, like that's the diff command, right? But if you want to interactively solve the conflicts, right now we have to open it in a notebook. It actually exports a notebook, and you have to save the notebook. But maybe you don't have the Jupyter lab server running, right? You want to do it in your terminal. That's what that's what I'm working on right now. Showing more things, like just printing some notebooks in your terminal, adding some Jupyter Lab extension support. So for people that don't want to use the CLI, instead of not using the Jupyter Lab server, they don't have to. So you can just stay on the Jupyter Lab server. Adding some GitHub Actions for the marketplace. Right now, you have to basically install Databooks to use their stuff, but just to make it a little bit nicer. Another thing that I wanted to do is just try to add functionality to export the notebook diff as an HTML. So I'm seeing this more of maybe in CI/CD. You know, if you open a pull request and I want to see what the difference is, I want to be able to take that artifact and just show it in the HTML on the browser to actually see the diffs. So just like little things like that that are going to be useful, going to be helpful, I think, in the collaboration. And again, if you have any suggestions, feel free to open an issue or just hit me up, slide on my DMs, whatever. So yeah, now I have some questions. I'll take the questions from the YouTube. All right, let's see. Pablo Coges. An interesting name. Hi, Murilo. How do you go about running a list of recipes for many files? Sort of like PyTest runs all the tests with a single command. So if you want to do this, you actually want to the recipes argument is that you can actually pass it a whole bunch of times. Or if you actually want to add in the configuration, it's just a list of recipes, right? So you can actually pass a whole bunch of things at once. So there's no really restriction. You can even mix the actual expressions with the recipes, right? You can just add as much stuff as you want there. Yeah, and again, like to all files, so you pass a path, like I said, and Databooks will actually find all the notebooks that are in that path, right? Like any child directory, it would actually look for all the contents there. And if you actually want to ignore just one, we also have an ignore option. So if you say, I pass a path, but ignore everything that is here, you can also do that, right? And just maybe one other comment is that the fix command, that only works with the files that are in Git there's the conflict, right? So any Git ignored file, like it won't have any conflict. So Databooks Fix will never find it. Cool. Any other questions? No? Okay, so maybe we can go back to the slides. I have a very important slide again. Okay, cool. No, not cool. Maybe they need to. I need to click on it. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, nice. Technology. Yeah, thank you. So, this is the documentation. Feel free to open an issue, create a pull request, give it a star. But also, this is a thank you for you that is watching, for you that are listening to me, for everyone that organized the RootsConf, for all the other presenters. So thanks for everyone that also helped me with Databooks. So thanks to you guys.